You're tuning into the Active Mom Podcast with physical therapist Dr. Carrie Pagliano, a real mom's guide to all things postpartum return to workouts after baby. If you're a postpartum mom, coach, trainer, or physical therapist looking for answers on how to get back to running, CrossFit, yoga, Pilates, HIIT, you name it, without the fear of pelvic floor issues or doing something wrong, this is the podcast for you. Let's start the show. All right. I've been paying attention a lot to the ultra community lately, and I kind of fell into this podcast called Trail Society and listened to this episode with this runner, Rachel Drake. And she was talking about her postpartum run experience. And she literally stopped me in the middle of my walk saying, you know what, next time around, I'm going to wait a little bit longer before running. And I was like, wait a second, I got to see what's up with this. So I reached out to Rachel, and she graciously, in her gigantically massive schedule, agreed to come on the show. So welcome to the Active Mom Postpartum Podcast, Rachel Drake.
Thanks so much for having me, Carrie. I'm really thrilled to be here.
All right. In a nutshell, tell us who you are, where you're from, what you do.
Yeah, so I am a mother of a 1.5-year-old. I'm a professional trail runner for Nike, and I am a fledgling anesthesiologist. I just finished up an MD PhD program at Oregon Health and Science University, and will be starting anesthesiology residency at the University of Utah.
So not busy at all. Not busy at all.
Not busy at all.
And now you're about to become like a postpartum running aficionado because everybody's going to come to you with all the ultra questions, right?
I mean, it's so funny. I have chatted with a lot of folks who have, gone through pregnancies, and I feel like the biggest thing is just we're all so different, and
Yep.
it's really hard to provide any sort of concrete guidance
Yeah.
because it's just there's just so much heterogeneity in the experience. So, it feels nice to still talk to other people who have gone through it and who still
Yeah.
have big competitive ambitions after having a child, but we we can't compare ourselves to one another.
Yeah. It's such an interesting conversation. I think there's so many sort of parallels. Like, one, just getting more women in the ultra community has been gigantic. And then what's the capability, what's the capacity on the other side of it? And we just don't know these things. You guys are literally on like the cutting edge of it, and you're a running experiment. I mean, how does that probably didn't feel that great to walk into the unknown? I don't know. Tell me.
I think even if it wasn't an ultra, like, there's still so much we don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at professional road marathoners, and you look at any one of those women who have had children, and
Yep.
they almost all of them have had stress fractures,
Yep.
and the fact that that's so common is just very shocking to me that we haven't
Right.
done more research and more, we haven't created a system that supports women going through that. And actually, I was just talking to Keely Henninger the
Yeah.
other day, one of the hosts of Trail Society, and I was looking for a prenatal vitamin that was like safe for sport, so NSF certified,
Yeah.
and we couldn't find one. Which was just it just is the perfect example of how I feel like our society and our community doesn't really think about, and yeah, it just isn't set up for women to want
Right.
to be mothers and athletes. And I'm not even just talking about professional athletes. It's like anyone who wants to do those things, which I think are two of the best things in the world.
Right? Totally. All right, let's backtrack a little bit. You've been an ultra runner a long time. You even, marathoner as well, qualified for the 2020 and this year's Olympic trials. Um, what was kind of going on in your head when you were thinking about running and thinking about getting pregnant? Are you thinking, okay, these things can be conducive? What were the thoughts that you had?
I think in the short term, it felt like a disappointment for my athletic
Mm,
endeavors. I had a big, racing calendar planned, and we did wanna get pregnant, but we weren't sure how long it would take, so we just kind of, um yeah, we just threw caution to the wind to see what would happen, and I wasn't thinking in the moment, "Oh, this is gonna be great for my athletic career," but I also knew a lot of the changes that happen with pregnancy, specifically the cardiovascular ones, are really conducive to uh, athletic performance.
Mhm.
So I held on to that nugget of optimism throughout my pregnancy as I got slower and slower. But I'm really proud of how I feel like I truly embraced the changes in my body. I didn't try to fight them. Obviously getting pregnant isn't you're not gonna be running faster
Yeah,
as you grow. But I think I it's such a unique time in your life to be a pregnant person, and I feel like I really embrace that.
that's awesome. There's so many people, I think, again, we're not necessarily given guidance on how to navigate it. I'm on a lot of Facebook groups where moms are like, "I'm in my first trimester, I feel horrible, I have a race on the schedule. I think I should just keep pushing through." It's like, "Oh, no, we need to kind of back off, and this is not the same training plan
Mhm.
as you had before." But, I don't know, like, why for you, why do you think that was easier for you to sort of wrap your head around? Did you have, friends that you kind of chatted with, or is it your medical background, or what do you think kinda helped with that?
I think knowing that it was such a short time in the scheme of my life that I would be pregnant, so it was I wanted to enjoy every trimester and, my pregnancy was really quite easy. I didn't have morning sickness, I didn't have any major I yeah, it was
You're
so
so lucky.
this also just speaks to, yes, there's such a variety in
Yeah.
experience. I have one of my best friends is pregnant with her 2nd right now, and she has hyperemesis, so she's
Mm.
puking all the time. She had that with her first as well,
Oh,
and she had to stop working, and she's just there's such a variety in how these things go.
yeah.
So I think maybe it was easier for me to embrace because I was feeling good. I was still able to run. Granted, I'm not pushing as hard as I was just because I didn't
Yeah.
feel comfortable doing that. It didn't feel right for me,
Mhm.
but I still ran, which turned more into walking. I
Mhm.
still I still completed a 50K, kinda early on in my pregnancy, and that felt meaningful to me, not from an athletic standpoint, not to prove anything, but it was because it's something that I truly love, and I
Mhm.
felt like I was making memories with my child, and nobody knew we were pregnant yet, so it felt like
Aw.
I was running with this little secret.
Yeah.
So it was more about just cherishing those moments and trusting that my body would eventually return to, a type of form that would allow me to be a competitive athlete again.
Yeah. Was it hard for you to find kind of medical providers throughout your pregnancy that understood kind of your capacity as an athlete, or was that difficult?
I My OB was great, and actually one of my best friends from med school is an OB, so I
Oh, great.
I was FaceTiming her when I was in labor, actually.
No way.
Yeah. When I was still at home. But it wasn't too bad. I think in Portland, I don't know if it's just the culture here, but, my OB basically said, "You can maintain the same, level of exercise you were doing before pregnancy, obviously, if it feels good."
Mhm.
Like, no action sports, no mountain biking as your belly gets bigger, like, none of that, but,
Yeah.
in terms of running, she's like, "You can maintain that, but be really good at listening to your body and
Mhm.
also make sure you're eating, more than enough and hydrating because those things are a little bit more tenuous, especially as you move on in pregnancy." So I felt really supported in that. It was more when it came to the postpartum that I felt like a little bit, a lack of support, and I remember being at my 6-week follow-up appointment,
Mhm.
kinda just asking my OB about when can I, start running, when can I what is this gonna look like, and they really didn't have any sort of guidance.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the hardest things. What kind of eh, I don't know, expectations might be the wrong word, but like what thoughts did you have about how those first 6 weeks were gonna play out, and then how did it play out for you guys?
Um, I I don't know what my expectations were. I feel like I had heard stories about people running, the week after, the day after they gave
Mhm,
birth, and I knew I was like, "Absolutely not. Just that's not gonna be me." Um, but in my mind, I was thinking more like, "Okay, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 12 weeks."
mhm,
I think it ended up being 6 weeks, which
mhm.
I could go back and look at my Strava, but when I say that, that sounds crazy to me. That feels like way too soon, and I was working with what I think is one of the best pelvic floor PTs, Jess Dorrington,
Oh,
and
yeah,
so
she's great.
yeah, yeah, I put, all my trust in her, and when she gave
Yeah,
me the green light, I was like,
yep,
"Absolutely,
yep,
I'm all in, let's do this." I was so eager, and I felt like I was already feeling those cardiovascular adaptations, like, I felt
mhm.
like my engine was so strong, and so I was really eager to let that rev, um, but I think, yeah, it was just too much too soon. I signed up for a 50K at 4 months
Mhm,
postpartum. I had ramped my mileage up to what was still about 75% of what I was doing pre-pregnancy, but it
mhm.
was still just way too much. Um, yeah, I feel kind of silly looking back at what happened because I ended up getting a sacral stress fracture, and I haven't had an injury in about 10 years.
Ugh,
And when that happened, I was like, "No, I don't get injured. This is not me."
right.
But then I look back at my training trajectory and I was like, "Well, of course I got injured." Like, there's so many it's so obvious retrospectively.
Well, and I feel like that's the entire conversation about anybody who's getting bone stress injuries in postpartum right now, is it's so easy to look in the rear view, one, because they're talking about it, and I think people were getting them for a long time and just not talking about it.
Mhm.
And then two, like, I don't it's easy to look at in the rear view, but you surrounded yourself with some really smart people that
Mhm.
sometimes we just don't know. I mean, I was, DMing somebody that, had raced over the weekend at Canyons, and I was like, "Well, how much did you take in?" Because they were breastfeeding during the
Is this
race.
Paris Arnold?
I only know her, no, it wasn't her, it was somebody else.
Okay, okay. We should come back to this though, but
Yes, no,
yeah.
no, no, but I'm like, we don't even I mean, you're taking in an extraordinary amount of calories to race or train that long. We have 0 sense of how much calories you need to take in for lactation, period. Like, we just don't know. So,
Yeah.
like, how do you even begin to have that conversation?
That is such a good point. I mean, there's such a paucity of data and resources poured into this. It's like,
Mhm.
just eat more, and you're like, "Okay, but, like, my stomach can only handle
Right,
so much food."
well, that's why I love listening to, Trail Society because, 1, there's no stigma around talking about food, which I totally appreciate,
It's
but
embraced.
talking about periods and bone stress injuries and postpartum and pregnancy, and the 3 of them aren't even pregnant, and they're still talking about it, which I'm like,
Yep.
"Okay, yes, let's destigmatize all this," but again, like, I feel like even last year with the female athlete conference, circling around RED-S, it was really recently that I think we're just paying attention to RED-S in a lactating athlete. And it's again, it sounds ridiculous in the rear view. It's like, why weren't
Mhm.
we talking? But why were we missing this?
Yeah, I know, and
um,
we're yeah,
go ahead.
at least we're talking about it now, but we're
Yeah.
still so far behind.
Yeah. I mean, for you kind of when you were trying to check those boxes, you're like, all right, I've seen a pelvic floor PT. I'm going to keep track of my mileage. Like, how did you like try to navigate the I don't know, like the training load and the nutrition and the breastfeeding and all of that? Like, what was your thought process going through it?
I remember one of my first trail workouts back, I think I did 4 by 2 minutes or 4 by 3 minutes uphill. And one
Mhm.
of our thoughts with that was, okay, when you run uphill, there's a lot less
Yep.
impact on the bone. So we're going to improve our running economy and improve our fitness, but
Mhm.
without that sort of pounding. And
Yep.
I ate a gel at the top of each of those reps,
Oh my
which
gosh.
ended up being for a 1-hour workout, it ended up being 180 grams. And I was still hungry.
Oh
And
my gosh. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. How did you
So
even get that down?
I don't
What
know, I was
what
just
gel was it? Do you
hungry.
remember? Can you
They
even
were all awesome sauces
okay. Can
from
you even
Spring.
eat that one now, or is it
Oh,
just
yeah, no, I
okay, that's
still
good.
can. Yeah. No, I haven't got palate fatigue at all. I
Okay,
think
that's good.
I I didn't it was only after I got the injury that I started trying to be a little more intentional with counting calories, and
Mm,
that's not something that I wanna recommend to anyone. I know that can be triggering for people, but it was empowering for me to try to get creative with food that had more dense calories
mhm.
in them. So I worked with a friend, who's a nutritionist, and she just kinda gave me a list of things that
Yep.
have more dense calories in them because you can only get like, there's a lot of foods that are kind of empty in that sense.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I felt like, I was eating 6 meals a day,
Mhm.
fueling a lot on the runs, and yeah, I really felt like I was doing everything right. I felt
Yeah.
like I had done my research, but one of the challenges I think with postpartum running is you don't feel the same as you felt before,
Mhm.
even if you're not, like, having pain or obvious red flags. I think it's hard to learn to trust your intuition again because you don't know what's normal.
Right. What were some things that didn't feel like yourself or you had to kinda get used to?
I think kind of having to go to the bathroom a lot, which I know is normal when you're breastfeeding because and please, you probably know more about this than I do, but my understanding is that, your estrogen's low, and so the smooth muscle that surrounds your, urethra is kind of less toned.
Yep.
Or like yeah, so it's e easier for you to have some more incontinence. So that was something that, you hear about with postpartum running, but
Mhm.
then I didn't really know about the link with nursing. And fortunately, I don't have that nearly to the same degree now that I've stopped nursing, but
Mhm.
that was something I think also there's just a and I we talk about this on the Trail Network podcast about, like, kind of intuitive training, but I think prior to getting pregnant, I was really good at just kinda knowing the right
Right.
volume, knowing how hard to push, knowing how long to go, and just, like, really trusting in that, and I think I went overboard postpartum because I was trying to I was like, "Well, this is gonna be hard because I haven't been training hard in a
Right.
long time, so I need to push and I need to do
Uh,
I need to push harder to get back to where I wanna be. I'm going to suffer more." But I don't
mm,
think that was the right approach, at least for me.
yeah. Yeah. With the change in nutrition and activity and that kind of stuff, did your baby have any issues as far as that translating over into breast milk at all? I know sometimes when people go super high in protein, especially if the baby's little, they'll have some digestive issues and people are concerned about that. Anything you had to navigate there?
Oh, like, with my nutrition
Yeah.
and him growing, or
Or
what do
just
you mean?
I
Having
think it's
enough
probably
supply?
more like little kids, like when I've had moms that, if their babies have, food sensitivities, then it kinda screws with mom's choices, or if mom changes her
Oh,
diet, it can affect the breast milk and baby's ability to process it and that sort of thing. So it can get you get 2 people involved instead of just 1 with the diet
right.
changes.
Yeah, fortunately, we didn't have
That's
any,
awesome.
hurdles that we had to overcome with
Yeah.
him, being sensitive to anything that I was eating, and I know breastfeeding is a whole 'nother topic of
Yeah.
challenges that, women have to or just nursing people have to overcome, and that was another thing that really, went pretty smoothly for me. I didn't have too many issues with getting that up and running, which I feel really lucky about. I know that that is definitely not the case, and it's not even the case for, different kids in the
Yeah.
same mom.
Yeah. How hard was it to find a replacement nursing bra for running?
Um, okay, well, I just sized up. Tyler and I are just reminiscing about my milk boobs. I was like, "Remember when my boobs were just huge?" Like,
Yes.
that was kinda fun. Yeah, just sized up. I didn't really use, like, the nursing bras, but I
Mhm.
found some padded Nike bras that were, like,
Okay.
the perfect mix of they were soft, and then the padding, if I leaked a little bit, the padding would absorb the milk.
Okay.
So, I feel like I found some great options for that. Another thing that really helped is, like, if I did a longer run, I would just immediately take my bra off in the car after, just to
Mhm.
kinda, like, reduce the amount of time that my breasts were compressed, and I think
Yes.
that helped with not having, like, plugged ducts or anything like that.
Yes. That's the worst. Anytime I have patients come in and they talk about plugged ducts or, anything along those lines, I think I have, like, phantom boob pain. It just you just there's nothing
Empathy
like that feeling
queen.
of your boobs solid rocks and the
Oh,
relief when they latch on and you're like, "Oh my
yeah,
god, thank you."
yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's funny when Louis started sleeping more through the night, I would wake
Oh.
up just in a puddle of milk, and I was like,
Mhm.
"Lou, are you
Yeah, and
you're
they're
not."
sleeping and you're awake.
I know.
This isn't right. This isn't right. Yeah, did you were you that person that were like, "Okay, I'm gonna work my running around my, feeding schedule," or how did you guys happen to work that out?
So pretty early on, our doctor, or I guess the pediatrician said, she's like, "It's okay for him to, take a bottle of your breast milk. Like,
Mhm.
he doesn't need to be on the boob all the time." So I think that really gave me a lot more freedom, and that
Yep.
it wasn't like he needed me
Right.
every single time he needed to eat. So when I nursed, I would collect my letdown with one of those Haka silicone
Ah,
collector
uh-huh.
things,
Mhm.
and I would collect quite a bit of milk, from that, and then we would just if we didn't give him that in that nursing session, we would just feed him that. If I was out running, Tyler would have
Nice.
that, and then eventually we had more of a stock, so I didn't need to be too, um, organized with
That's
planning
good.
training and nursing, but yeah, I guess if I had to pump because he was napping or something, that was a little bit of a bummer because it's just I much preferred nursing, but,
Yes, I would agree.
um, yeah, or if I had to drive further to get to a trail, I
Mm,
would maybe pump in the car, and
yep.
that was yeah.
Yeah, that's when you've gotten to, like, a certain mom elite level is when you can drive and pump at the same time.
Yeah, I really need to get one of those hands-free ones for the next one. I think
Yeah,
that
no,
would be
okay, my
cool.
kids are a little bit older, they're 10 and 13, so we didn't have the cool fun stuff you guys have now, and so I remember my point of glory is driving home stick shift from
Whoa.
Georgetown to Arlington while pumping,
Whoa.
and no one said anything because I had, like, cords and everything. I'm like, "I am a rock star."
You're like, "I am such a badass." That is r okay, the stick shift, that is really cool. Mad respect, that's
Right?
awesome.
I mean, that's when you know you made it, right?
Yeah, that's so cool.
Alright, so let's go back, you're running. What made you realize you had a stress fracture? What was that symptom? How soon was it before you got a sense of what it was?
Yeah, it was maybe a week, um, maybe a week or 2. I just was having, like, some achy low back pain.
Mhm.
And it honestly just felt like that feeling after a long run where
Mhm.
you're just like, "Oh, I need to just kinda get in the child's pose and, like,
Stretch it out. Yep.
curve my back." Like, it felt like a kind of a normal a normal feeling that I had
Mhm.
had in the past, and so I didn't really think much of it, but it just stuck around,
Mm.
and we were going to that 50K, um, it was the Orcas Island 50K, and it was just I did a shakeout the day before, and it hurt so bad that I had to
Mm.
walk. I had seen Jess earlier that week, and she was like, "Green light, I think this is facet joint pain." I was like, "What are the chances this is, like, a bony thing?" And she's like, "I really don't think it's that," like,
Yeah.
and I think both of us retrospectively are like, "Well, of course it was that," but so I started the race, and I got about halfway through, and I was just like, "No way, this is so
Mm.
painful." So it was, it was a really big disappointment, just because I feel like I had worked hard to get back to
Yeah.
being in that scene and getting to do what I love to do, and, being pulled out of that and
Yeah.
being in such pain, it was a really big bummer. And then Tyler was racing Trans Gran Canaria over in the Canary Islands,
Mhm.
and I was able to get an MRI before we went on that trip because I was supposed to do a race over there as well.
Oh.
So I spent that trip also injured, which was a bummer. But I think another thing about all of this that also doesn't get talked about is I feel like when you become a mom, your identity changes a lot, at least it did
Mhm.
for me, where so much of your time and energy and thought goes into this wonderful little human,
Mhm.
but a lot of the things that made you you are either no longer accessible or are much you're spending much less of your time doing it. So I
Mhm.
felt like, okay, I was getting back to the thing that made me feel the most like myself,
Right.
and then you lose that, and I think that mentally is really hard.
Yeah. How did you kinda wrap your head around that, knowing that, you needed to take the time to rehab it and but you touched it, you tasted it, like,
Yeah.
how did you navigate it?
Yeah, I think I had a lot of confidence in my engine, but the chassis of my vehicle was really needed some work. And I feel like I really leaned into trying to optimize everything that I could. So I found out that actually my vitamin D was low. So I'm
Mm.
upping the vitamin D, and I'm bringing another physical therapist into the mix, Matt Walsh, who is truly like one of my favorite humans in the world. And he obviously is not a pelvic floor PT, but he understood like the biomechanics
Yep.
of how my body was working and the importance of core strength because my trunk was rotating more wildly because I didn't have the core
Yeah.
strength, and that, uh, along with low bone density, likely contributed to
Mhm.
the stress fracture. So, I kind of broadened my resources, and then another really big blessing was I had scheduled a rotation. I was still in medical school at this point. I had scheduled a rotation in the ICU, which is one of the hardest, most time intensive and sort of intellectually and emotionally,
Mm.
rotations you can do, and I loved it. It was really interesting and really meaningful, and the people that I was working with were just brilliant, and I also loved it because it made me forget that I was injured.
Mm.
I was working on something different, and these people I was working with didn't care about my running, and they hardly knew I was a mom except when I snuck away to go pump.
Right.
So, I think it helps to have a couple different things,
Yeah.
cooking at the same time that you can pivot to. Because I think if I didn't have that, I would have been really, really
Yeah.
depressed.
Did you turn to, because there's been quite a few people, I think, more lately open about navigating stress fractures after pregnancy in the pro run community, not only road racing, but ultras. Like, did you have people that you reached out to that you knew had gone through the same thing?
Yeah, actually, it was really cool. So, Nike had a meeting with sort of their innovation team and just to to try to optimize this for me, and they
Yeah.
had Shannon Robery there as well, and she and I were chatting, and she had literally the exact same injury at the exact same time,
Yeah.
um, and I think talking to her and hearing that I think she ended up 6th at USA's that year, which was not, where she was used to being, but it was really inspiring to just hear that, she had this downfall. She went through the same exact injury as me
Mhm.
and, was able to come out the other side and kinda hear what she did to optimize that, and I'm super grateful that, I was able to get plugged in with her and with some folks at
Yeah.
Nike who were able to help me out.
That's great. No, I think just not feeling alone
Yes.
and, you navigating as an athlete and then also as a medical professional, it's almost like a double whammy, right?
Mhm.
Like, you're looking at it and saying, "Okay, well, shouldn't I have been able to figure that out?" And I think that's what a lot of PTs, I mean, that's what I navigated is like, this is my day job, but yet I had this problem and this problem, this problem. Shouldn't I have seen this coming? So you
Mhm.
kinda have to navigate that piece of it too, which, I think eventually inevitably makes you a better provider, but, yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's just a double whammy when this is your job.
Yes. Yes, I definitely felt some shame because I felt
Yeah,
like, yeah, I should be good at this. I know what's going on. I know the pitfalls and still I, made this mistake that now feels very obvious in hindsight.
yeah, but again, I think it feels obvious in hindsight, but we didn't have that information then. We're just wrapping our head around it. That's why I think these stories
Yeah.
like yours are so important to share because people will see things that they relate to and be like, "Oh, that might be me. I need to ask." Because
Right.
again, there's just stuff that we don't know. We don't know how many, gels you need to take in to counteract a
A
pumping
lot is
session,
the
right? Yeah,
answer.
right.
N plus
Exactly.
1. More like N plus 2.
So how did you feel like as you were starting to rehab back and get to running again? Was that scary? Did you feel confident?
Yeah, I mean, coming back from injury is always scary. I did not feel confident. I feel like especially I mean, even though a bone injury is something where this is the amount of time that it should take to heal, I guess there's some comfort with that, but also I think my confidence ended up coming from probably working with Matt and
Mhm.
just slowly doing things that I felt like were not only optimizing this specific area, but looking more holistically at my biomechanics and how my body was moving and trying to make it, more optimal that I'm not putting a ton of stress on one part of my body.
Yeah.
And I would say it's still a work in progress. I was just talking to a fellow trail runner today, and she's asking how training was going for Western States, and I said, "I still feel a little bit timid with wanting to build up my volume," and I
Mm.
know it's been a while since I had the injury, and it's also been 7 months since I stopped nursing, but I still am
Yeah.
yeah, it feels like it wasn't that long ago. It was about a year ago that I think I was starting to run again.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think and to me, like, I don't know, I feel like when you come back from an injury, you're kinda navigating that fear anyway, but I think postpartum, as you mentioned earlier, you're trying to figure out who this body is again and to learn to trust it,
Mhm,
that, yeah, it had this capacity before, is it still there now?
mhm.
Um, is that something that you think about in your long runs?
I maybe not specifically in the long runs, but I
Yeah.
feel like I've really tried to embrace this mantra of as I'm training and doing my strength work and physical therapy, I try to paint it as not like I'm trying to get back to where I was before, but that
Mm,
I'm trying to get to know my new body.
yes.
And so many people have asked, "Do you think you're back? Do you think you're back?" And it's like, no, and never. Like, I'm
Mhm.
just getting to know my new body, and it's gonna
Exactly.
have different superpowers than my previous body had, but it's not better or worse.
Right.
It's just new, and I think that feels a lot healthier of a mindset for me.
Yeah. Before you got pregnant, did you do a lot of strength training, as part of your training? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like, my looking back, my best years, I guess, were lifting at least twice a week.
Mhm.
Um, I don't always have time for that, but I think as I was building back postpartum, that's been a huge focus, and I wish it had been more of a focus sooner.
Yeah.
Like, getting maybe even because I'm running less, maybe lifting 3 times a week and trying to eventually get back to lifting heavy
Right.
when it feels good and safe and, but just doing tons of other
Mhm.
strength work. I tried really hard to research how Faith Kipyegon came back from her
Mm.
pregnancy because she's the super mom, her and Shelly Ann Fraser-Price.
Right? Oh my gosh. Yeah, no kidding.
And I think Faith I don't think she ran for 6 months after giving birth or maybe even a year,
Mhm.
and I read somewhere that she was doing strength work 3 times a week. So,
Yeah.
I think that's a decent starting point to
Yeah.
try
Well,
to emphasize.
and that's a whole 'nother interesting research area as well. Like, I spend a lot of time working with runners, but then also Olympic lifters and CrossFit athletes, and we're just getting data now, looking at current kind of lifting patterns of pregnant and postpartum women because the guidance before was based on more like nurses who lift, which is not even close to Olympic lifting at all. It was more kind of job related. And so that's where a lot of the recommendations were, oh, just a couple pounds or do light or, even papers
Mhm.
coming out now are like hand weights. But yet
Mm,
a friend of mine, Christina Previtt, just published this spring looking at, we've got moms that are lifting heavy, like over 200 deadlift, like really high hundreds in other
nice.
lifts, and having similar postpartum outcomes to women who did not lift. So if we're looking at that, saying, okay, well, we know that it's not impacting the fetus in a bad way and it's safe. What are the outcomes as far as mom is concerned? Is this actually a really good thing? But now we got
Yeah,
to pull that data and pull it over to the runners who we got to help them
yeah.
get strong anyway. Because I think I feel like the average recreational runner doesn't strength train much anyway. They'd rather
I think
run.
that's true, and that's totally fair. It's
Yeah.
not the most fun. Yeah,
But
but it's
it's
so
like trying
helpful.
to pull that data over and saying, "Okay, well, yeah, we can lift sooner. It's good for your running. It's good for, staying strong during pregnancy. And can we start doing this earlier in postpartum?" But the other thing I was thinking as you were talking was, I think also this spring too, there was a paper comparing, what running form looked like in pregnancy versus postpartum, and that really kind of went right to, it's kind of a wreck and a half in our core
Mhm.
region, and we're still behaving like we've got something to protect and hold, and we just need to build some strength back like crazy.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I'm curious what you think about the heavy lifting while pregnant, like, just intuitively, I'm thinking about, when your uterus is growing, you're having increased intra-abdominal
Mhm.
pressure on your pelvic floor, and then when you lift, presumably that's increasing that pressure.
Yeah. Well, and I think these are the conversations we're having as providers right now. I mean, Tia Toomey, who's won the CrossFit Games 6 years in a row, she just had her baby. She's coming back again. She lifted right up till the end. We've got a lot more athletes, like pro lifters, lifting all the way through pregnancy and having reasonable outcomes and getting back sooner.
Hmm,
Baby's fine, and so that's where we almost have to go back and
yeah,
look at the individual circumstances and be like, "Where is the limit?" We don't know.
mhm,
Um, you know, I shouldn't find, does a limit exist on myself, but because I was never gonna win
right,
the CrossFit Games, you know? But
yeah,
in certain people, just like for you to be able to go, run an ultra even, a short time, it to me is would, for me to get to an ultra at this point in my life, I'm like, "That'd be awesome." But for you, you're like, "Yeah, this every day." Like, people that have that genetic capacity to perform at this level, is there some sort of thing going on innate that allows them to be able to do this? And again, we just don't know because people
mhm,
haven't tried, and then they put their stuff up on social media and everybody shames the heck out of them. So,
yep,
um, I mean, it's what Steph Bruce went through with this third pregnancy. She was super open about, running through a pregnancy and, all the hate stuff that she got. And she's not the only one, but
Mhm.
there's just so much that we don't know, but it should be up to us as individuals to work with somebody to help us find what feels right to us, which might not feel right to somebody else. So the short
Yeah,
answer is I don't know. I mean,
right.
I used to have these preconceived notions of what was possible, and people keep showing up and, flipping the script on that. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think kinda what you're getting at too is we all have such vastly different baselines. So these Olympic lifters, like, that is their everyday bread and butter,
Yep.
and them doing that all throughout their pregnancy and still lifting heavy is just normal. Their body expects it, they can tolerate it,
Yep.
and it was kinda like that for me with running.
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
think it's interesting because a lot of times, coming from, the general population, you're seeing physicians encourage pregnant women to be active and,
Mhm.
do gentle exercise because you don't wanna tell someone to, "Yeah, you should pick up running, you should pick up
Right.
weightlifting," like, nothing new, but
Right.
your body kind of craves, what it knows too, so I
Mhm.
think it's good to lean into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but also too, I mean, if somebody came to you when you were pregnant and said, "Oh, don't run anymore. It's you're gonna shake the baby. It's gonna be awful." Like your body,
Mhm.
you know the capacity of your body. That doesn't make sense. But for somebody who isn't a runner, that might make
Mhm.
total sense. And so
Mhm.
again, it comes back to um what we know is we need to give individual guidance. And if you are just a regular person on the street, don't necessarily take medical advice from the pro athlete who's lifting 17 times as much as what you're capable of.
Yeah. But the thing with all that too is even if you do get guidance
Mhm.
from some of the world's best,
Yep.
foremost experts and you have all the resources at your fingertips, you might still fail, which is
Yep.
what I did.
Well, but here's the thing too, and again, I know it probably feels like a failure to you, but I mean, for me, I'm like, now we have so much more information. Like what you deem failure is allowing so many more people to have a choice to do something different, because we're going to learn from that, and you're going to learn from that if you decide to, do this whole thing all over again. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of like birth though, and we talk about this a lot in pelvic floor PT, where people want to prevent issues from happening, and there's only a certain number of things that we can control, and to me, that's like the first time that it's like parenting 101, like you gave up control on this part, like sometimes whatever's going to happen
Forever
is going to
ago.
happen exactly. We're gonna have to roll with it. So I feel like there's some degree, anytime you're dealing with pregnancy and postpartum, there's gonna have to be some uncertainty. You're gonna have to roll with it and take with
Mhm.
whatever it comes, and we don't get to choose what part that is.
Yeah. I
But
would argue though too that I don't feel like we've come that far in the year since I've had my injury. I think
you don't think so?
not I think there's more conversation around it
Okay.
for sure. There's light being shed on it, but this has been going on for a long time. Like
Mhm.
Shannon Robury's injury, I think that was probably 5 to 10 years ago.
Mhm.
It happened to Kellen Taylor, it happened to Molly Huddle.
Mhm.
It happened to a ton of people, and I think it's great that we're talking about it, but I'm not seeing any, like, "All right, here's how to do it." Um, like, I, of course, recommend, working with the pelvic floor PT and doing all those things, but there's no, like, at least that I've seen, a real applicable advice that can be distributed to the masses, and that's
Mhm.
not gonna happen without a big study or a big
Yeah.
like, you could have a consensus among a group of experts, and I think I saw something like that out of the UK, but I read
Mhm.
that as well, and there was still no, like
Yeah. No, and I get your frustration. And I think maybe this is where I've been spending a lot of time kind of sharing history this year because I'm eager like you. I'm impatient like you. I also work in a profession that the likelihood of a randomized control trial is really unlikely. So
Mhm,
we're a little more gray over here in PT
mhm,
land. Um, but I think kind of stepping back and understanding kind of all the parallels and how fast things have gone even in the past
hmm,
3 to 5 years. I mean, I've been doing this 25 years now, and just the recommendations that we give moms to not wait, to see somebody, until
mhm,
postpartum, to see somebody a couple weeks after, but then shift over to sport. One, I mean, let's just talk Kara Goucher for a second. Like,
yeah,
she was training 2 weeks after and not getting paid for it and having to deal with
yep,
all the repercussions, and it was only last year that, the book came out and she kinda shared that whole story.
yeah, I just
Um,
read her book, it was
so good, and Lauren
yeah,
Fleshman, and again, I think pulling these threads through, um, kind of how we were treating our young athletes, as just small boys and ignoring periods and not having those discussions and eating disorders. And I just feel like we had to kind of pull that all together to even say, look at energy deficiency and lactation. There's menopause and
mhm,
perimenopause is having a huge moment right now, which now is making me look back at postpartum as another low estrogen state. And I'm like, how many things do we know now and pay attention to with perimenopause and menopause? Can I pull back and now apply
mm,
to
yeah,
postpartum? And so I just and getting more women in medicine and getting more women at doing research and that kind of stuff,
mhm,
like, I totally feel you, but I'm also like,
yeah,
this is the
yeah,
fastest it's gone in my entire
yeah,
career, and it's so freaking cool, but at the same time too, like, there's so much individuality, like you said, and you're like, "Okay, what do we
absolutely,
have to give to the masses?" What we have to give to the masses is now I will sit down with my runner patient who she's like, "If I don't run, I'm gonna lose my mind." And I'm like, "Okay, let's have a conversation about your load. Let's have a conversation
mhm,
about your strength." I may not have any strict,
yeah,
numbers to give her, but now she knows to pay attention, and that wasn't a
mhm,
conversation I even had a year ago. So
yeah,
for me, I'm like, it's here, but I understand it's also not,
yeah,
standard word on the street kind of stuff too. But it's society too, like, we're ready to be done with this crap where we're treated like boys and the
yeah,
methodology and research and that kind of stuff. I don't know, that's my 2 cents.
yeah, no, I totally agree, and I really appreciate you bringing your insight and many years of experience because 'cause you've been paying attention to this for a lot longer than me. I
That's
have
okay, I'm like,
haven't
"Come
been
on,
paying
let's go, let's
attention,
go."
so yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you put it like that, and I'm coming from more of the, like, basic science
Yeah,
background, like, I studied developmental origins of disease in graduate school, and so I
mhm,
know how, impossible it is to do, like you said, randomized control
yeah.
trials on anything, but specifically in pregnancy, like, it's just
Hormones.
not gonna happen. And yeah,
No,
not even just the hormones, but, like, to have
the ethics matter.
interventions
Right.
in pregnancy with any chance of,
Exactly.
like, things not going great
Yep.
or yeah, it's really hard to study,
Yeah.
so
I will say this year, probably the last 2 years, a colleague of mine, Margie Davenport in Alberta, she's done a lot, just even just, having conversations with elite athletes about what they need in pregnancy and postpartum, and then
mm,
you've got people, like She Races with Sophie Power, like that's come up and made a huge difference in the UK, just again, helping with contracts. Again, there's all these other parallel things to get people, to get you guys the care that you need and money,
yeah. And
resources, and that kind of
having
stuff.
yeah, having pelvic floor, like you said, having that be, something you're referred to, like,
Mhm.
my OB never, uh, even suggested that I like, at my follow-up appointment, and I'm comparing this to a friend who had a baby around the same age who lives in France, and she has, weekly or every other week pelvic floor PT, lactation support, like,
Mhm.
it's a much more robust support system, it
Yeah.
seems.
Well, and, you going into, I don't know how much you'll have to navigate this in anesthesiology, but, like, we're constantly fighting for our lives for, payment and reimbursement and, meanwhile, I mean, we do a whole conversation on, insurance companies and their CEOs making a bajillion dollars and we get nothing, but whatever. I digress.
Yeah, it's
Aren't you
not
glad you're
right.
headed into this field?
Yeah. I was just commiserating with someone about this the other day, and it's tough, it's frustrating not only, as someone who's, like, trying to make their profession in it, but also when you think about your patients and,
Yes.
um, like, how much you have to advocate for yourself as a
Yes.
patient, and some people have the communication skills and the finances and the time to be able to do that,
Right.
and others do not, and it's just not fair that I mean,
Yeah.
I was thinking about, um, the triathlete who won Kona. I
Oh,
forget his
yes.
name too.
Chelsea Sodaro.
Yes, Chelsea
Mhm.
Sodaro. I listened to a podcast with her and just hearing her talk about how challenging it was to seek the services that she needed
Mhm.
postpartum, it just brings me to tears, like,
Oh, it's horrible.
and she was someone who she even said, she's like, "I had a lot of resources, but it was still impossible for me." And so if it's
Right.
this hard for me, how much harder is it for someone who's a single parent working multiple jobs? Like,
Yeah, it's privilege. It's total that. But I think also too, there's this assumption that you guys as pro athletes have the world at your feet and that fixes everything. And, we're sitting here having a conversation that says, okay, at least you know, we can do some things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has the answer to everything. What made you decide to ask to see Jess?
I had a friend, actually, I had a lotta girlfriends, we were all having babies at the same time,
Ah, that's great.
and one of them had gone to see her and just recommended her, so, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, she's got a lot of fun things coming up. So we've been chatting when the right time is to have her to come on the podcast. So
Nice.
yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so looking ahead, um, let's start with Western states coming up in June. How excited are you about getting the golden ticket?
Yeah, really excited. That was super meaningful. I was reflecting on that and just I was injured a year prior. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it was really, really cool to not only feel healthy, but have enough fitness that I was able to win that race. And um yeah, yeah, it was great.
What did it mean to have Lou at the finish line to see you?
It's so fun. I mean, the trail running community is so wonderful, and I love that we can be at races and just
Mhm.
kinda let him wander around, and he's taken care of by everyone, and
Aw.
it was really fun to bring him into the fold.
Yeah. As far as training goes now, you said you're starting to ramp up a little bit,
Mhm.
get through Western states, and then you head off to your residency shortly thereafter. Um, you're looking ahead. You mentioned on Trail Society, and that was the comment that really kind of hooked me. You're like, if I ever do this again, I'm going to
Yeah.
do it differently. Do
Mhm.
you mind kind of revisiting that thought a little bit?
Yeah, I think personally, I I really think I started running at 6 weeks. That just is way too soon for me. I think there's a lot more fundamental work that needs to be done before we get
Mhm.
to the fun stuff of running. So I would say I would wanna wait 6 months to run, but I would still, I would do some biking and some hiking and a lot of strength work, and I think honestly, I think if I had done that, I would've gotten back even a lot faster because I wouldn't have had
Yeah.
the setback of the injury.
Yeah.
Um, and I loved nursing, so I would want to do that for a year again, and I really think you can do a lot with low volume.
Yes.
So yeah, just not being afraid to be like, "Yeah, I run 20 miles a week. I run 30 miles a week, and I can still potentially win a race." Like, I
Yeah.
mean, going into Black Canyon, I was running 60 miles a week maximum,
Hmm.
and before CIM, I think it was more like 50,
Hmm.
and I was running with a fellow mother over in Hong Kong, mother of 2, who, by the way, was 4th at CCC, this prestigious 100K in
Yeah,
Europe, 4 months postpartum.
that's
Yeah,
insane. Oh my
yeah,
god.
and she was like, "Wow, if you can run 2:35 on 50 miles a week, you would run 2" I don't know, she said some crazy time, "if you ran more miles," and I was like, "No, no, no, that is
No,
not
that's not
how
how
it
this
works, that
works.
is not for me."
That is one thing, like, obviously, on a much smaller level that I have come to realize, and I don't know how much of that is just, like, change in how we looked at training too, but, like, you can get faster on less. It isn't always the slog, and I think that totally speaks to the average mom that might have 10 minutes to throw together. It's not perfect. It's not that 40-mile or that
Mm.
40-minute mark, but
Mhm.
you throw a bunch of those together, you're gonna build fitness, and
Yep.
I think to go back to you, like, you have that fitness in there,
Mhm.
and it doesn't take that much to tap it, especially if everything else, like you said, if your engine and your chassis are going okay, doesn't take that much,
I
um,
totally agree.
which I think, again, it goes back to that identity, is you feel like, okay, that person who I was, they did this kind of weekly mileage, and I have to get back to that. But the fact of the matter is, as a mom, you become smarter, you become more time efficient, which obviously you've figured out doing all the things that you do. And that's one of the I did post, I think you saw on Instagram. I'm like, what questions do you have for Rachel? And that question came up like 7 times. Like,
The
how do
time
you have time
balancing.
for all of this? So maybe
Okay.
let's answer that one.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I've painted a false narrative. It's like, yes, it's true. I am a full-time mom. Yes, I am a professional athlete. And yes, I am, a fledgling anesthesiologist, but I am never doing all 3 of these things full on at the same
Yeah.
time. So, like, when I plan my racing, I look at my medical rotation calendar and I say, "Okay, this is a lighter rotation. I can train more here.
Hmm.
Okay, this rotation's gonna be really intense. This needs
Hmm.
to be just more maintenance mileage." Um, I'm never, like, fully sending any one of those all at
At
once.
the
And
same time.
even when I talked about that ICU rotation, my mom came and lived with us for 3 of the
Mm.
4 weeks of that, and I wasn't running at all then.
Mhm.
So, I think yeah, I mean, just knowing that yeah, it's okay to not be all in on every single aspect of your career, your competitive athletic ambitions,
Yeah.
and even your parenting. Like, I wanna be there for Lewis all the time, but I also know that I cannot just be with him all day, every day,
Yep.
so we get help.
Yes. And I think that message needs to be amplified because, prior generations, the one that kinda impacted me was, "Oh, lean in, you can have it all," which is a crock of you know what, and
Mhm.
if you do that, you're going to implode, quite
Yeah.
honestly.
It's
And
it's not real.
no, no, not at all. So for you, you feel like when you're not running, the medical aspect kinda fills you up and vice
Mhm.
versa? Yeah.
And I really think that it's kept me from getting injured, it's kept me from, I think, more challenges with mental health, like
Mm,
having things that give me purpose and aspects of my life that I'm advancing, because if you're just an injured professional athlete, that's I mean, that's really hard. You don't
yeah,
have you can't just PT your way out of that, like,
no.
um, yeah, I had coffee with Gabby Rooker this morning. She's
Mhm,
a professional, road runner for
mhm,
Nike and fellow Minnesotan, and she's a physician's assistant, and we were just talking about how much we kinda loved having that other aspect of our lives where
mhm.
you're focusing on something else. She said after the Olympic trials, she was just really downtrodden, and then she worked for a week, and it put things in perspective,
It does, yeah.
seeing patients and contributing to the world in another way, so
Mhm. Now
I'm
for you,
grateful.
any reason you chose anesthesiology over anything related to sport?
Yeah, I mean, I never really considered doing anything within sport. I love running, I love contributing to that space, but I
Mhm.
kinda like to be a little bit more, incognito in that scene. Like, I don't wanna be I think if I had gone into, like, PM&R or something,
Yeah.
people would be like, "Oh, yeah, it's Rachel, the runner," but that rarely came up on my anesthesiology interviews, and I want my, academic record to speak for itself and not my
Gotcha.
athletic record. And also my mom was a pediatric CRNA,
Mhm.
and, um, she and I are very similar, so I think I was kind of drawn to it for that
Aw.
reason as well. Yeah.
That's awesome. No, I love it when I see people that kinda are able to branch out and not necessarily go into the, "Okay, you're an athlete, you gotta do sports and PM&R," and that kinda stuff too. It's still cool, but I like when
It is
people branch
cool.
out a little bit, so
Yeah.
alright. At the end of every episode, I ask a few questions, so we're gonna start with this one, and you may not have an answer because 'cause you're too busy. Book you're reading or podcast you're listening to right now?
I listen to a ton of podcasts. I can't just name one because I probably listen to 4 hours of podcasts a day. Book I'm reading, I just put To the Gorge on hold at the
Yes.
library,
Yes.
and I'm gonna go to the event. There's an event in Portland, I think, on Monday
Yay!
night. I gotta talk to Tyler about that, but,
Okay.
yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to reading that, and I started reading The Nightingale,
Oh,
um yeah, but then I didn't get through it by the time I had to return it because it was so popular.
aw,
So, I would like to get my hands on that one
okay.
again.
Are you a physical book reader or a Kindle reader?
Physical book reader.
Okay.
And that's
I
why I like the library because I don't wanna have a bunch of stuff you can see all these books behind me.
I was gonna say you have a lot of books.
Those are all Tyler's books, but I don't like to hold on to them.
Okay.
I like to read them and give them back.
I gotcha. No, I will say I am very much a, child of the '70s and I enjoy my paper and writing and that sort of thing. I have converted a little bit as a mom to Kindle because if I start reading something and it looks like it's gotta go back and I can't, you know,
Mm.
re-up it, I just shut off my Wi-Fi and then it holds it
I've
until I'm
heard this
done.
trick. I've heard this trick. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
So sneaky.
It
I love
works
that.
because I'm usually reading a couple books at once, and nighttime's awful because 'cause I'll go to sleep really quick. I get through maybe 2 pages, so it takes a really long time to get through a book, so
Yeah.
that's my
M
secret.
Okay, maybe I'll fire up the Kindle, and I think those digital copies tend
Yes.
to be a little more accessible at the
Yep.
library, so
Yep, and that's and for my kids too, actually, all of their stuff is on, we have, like, a family Kindle account, so I can navigate and get their books and stuff that they want and,
cool.
bring it on trips and that kinda stuff too, so,
Awesome.
there's a place for it. There's a place for it.
Cool.
Alright, favorite activity since becoming a mom?
I just like letting Lewis loose in the world and watching him interact,
Toys
at
are
the
fun.
park or yeah, just seeing how I guess we'll walk around our little village, near our house, and I just like to see how he interacts with people. Just
Yeah,
observing.
that was my favorite, my oldest, he's 13 now, which I've been doing a lot of reflecting back because he was my little guy for so long, it was just the 2 of us,
Oh.
and remembering those times where, he would just be exploring the world, and now we're getting to do it as a teenager.
Yeah. So crazy.
It goes by fast. I hate when people say that,
It's
but it's
true,
it's no
though.
joke.
Yeah.
It is no joke, especially once they start school, and then once they hit the double digits, it gets crazy, so be forewarned, enjoy
It's
now.
yeah, I know, my heart is just, going pitter-patter in my chest, yeah.
And he's at, like, that 1.5 stage, they're just stinking adorable at that
Mhm.
point.
I know.
They're just,
Yeah.
like, mushy little balls of, like, roly-poly human, they're very
Yes.
cute.
Yes. It's so great.
Alright, for
Mm.
you, based on your experience, what's one piece of advice you'd give a mom friend?
I'd say just trust your gut and know that you're the best mom for your
Mm,
child, and don't worry about, what the internet says or what your neighbor's doing or your friends are doing, you know what's best for your family unit and just
yes.
find peace in that.
Yep, I think the sooner you figure that one out, the better with a lot of things. Alright, who's someone in the postpartum running space that we should know about?
Gareth Arnold. She is 7
Mm.
months. I don't know if it's Kareth or Kareth, but I
I
love
just
her.
started following her after, this weekend. Yes,
Yeah, so
I did.
she has 2 kids. The
Yep.
youngest is 7 months old. So for those who don't really follow the trail running space, the Canyons Endurance Run happened last weekend,
Mhm.
and it was, really competitive. People are going for golden tickets to Western States. She finished 4th in a super competitive field. She might she might get a ticket. I think the 2nd place woman, MK, is still deciding. So I'm
Oh,
just so in awe of what she's doing right now. And I say this, not because I think everyone should aspire to run 100K at 7 months postpartum. It's mostly just because I think it's incredible. Like,
yes.
I know that I don't think I would even try to do that, but I just think it's really a cool story, and yeah.
Yeah. No, I've been again, with so many just visible examples of what moms are capable of. That's where I sort of step back again to that history, and we think about the examples that our moms had and they didn't.
Mhm.
And, now the examples that our kids are going to have and how that's gonna look differently, just like what is possible. I might not be able to do that, but look what these, moms are doing, and it's so stinking cool. And you
Yeah.
can't help but just, like, have a big old smile on your face, even if you have
Yeah.
no idea who she is or what the ultra
Yes.
community is or anything like that. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And I
definitely
think
awesome.
the other thing too is, like, I think we love to talk about these success stories, but also we need to acknowledge
Yes.
that's not the norm, and we need to tell more stories about the trials and tribulations, because there's
Mhm.
certainly more of those than there are of these
Mhm.
mountaintop moments,
Yep.
and I think generally people are doing a better job about that, but
Yeah. Well, and I think also too, just being real about what it took to get to that point. It's not kind of like what you're saying about your average day. Like you're not doing everything all the time. It's a little bit here, it's a little bit there. Like everything kind of shifts and rotates.
Mhm.
And the ups and downs that it took for you to get to this point. Again, I think that's why people like you sharing your story is so powerful, because the more we get this kind of variations in what we can all go through, then we're educated to ask, or at least even be aware, or just, I don't know, think differently, or look at what you're doing a little bit differently. So, so important. All right, and then the last one, what does it mean to you to be an active mom in postpartum?
Mm. I mean, I just like I just like moving my body, so, um, I think it's just about self-expression and finding joy, and figuring out what you find joy in, and for me, that happens to be, being physically active, and a lot of that comes with deepening community as well, so it's not just necessarily me grinding it out by myself, but finding others to do it with.
Yeah, and it's been super fun, following you and kind of
Thank
watching your
you.
journey. I'm excited to watch you at Western States coming up.
Thank you.
Um, and good luck. If you guys are interested more in Rachel's story and watching her journey going into Western States, you can follow her on Instagram. Rachel is it Rachel Ray Drake? There we go.
You got
On
it.
Instagram. Thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us. And again, good luck coming up at Western States.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Did you enjoy the podcast? If so, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and tell a friend to do the same. Are you a postpartum mom or postpartum pro wanting to know more about getting back to running after baby? Check out all my free goodies on carriepagliano.com. This podcast represents the opinions of Dr. Carrie Pagliano and her guests to the show. The content should not be taken as medical advice and is for entertainment purposes only. Always consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions.